Arthur C. Clarke, 3001, The Final Odyssey. Chapter 6, Brain Cap. I'm afraid you'll have to make an agonizing decision, said Professor Anderson, with a smile that neutralized the exaggerated gravity of his word. I can take it, Doctor. Just give it to me straight. If you can be fitted into your brain cap, you have to be completely bald. So, here your choice. At the rate your hair grows, you'd have to be shaved at least once a month, or you'll have to have a permanent. How's that done? Razor scalp treatment kill the follicle at the root. Is it reversible? Yes, but there's messy and painful and takes weeks. Then I see how I like being hairless before committing myself. I can't forget what happened to Samson. Who? Character in the famous old book. His girlfriend cut off her hair while he was sleeping. When he woke up, all his strength had gone. Now I remember. Pretty obvious medical symbolism. Still, I wouldn't mind losing my beard. I'd be happy to stop having once and for all. I'll make the arrangement. And what kind of wig would you like? Paul laughed. I'm not particularly vain. Think it would be nuisance. Probably won't bother. Something else I can decide later. That everyone in this era that was artificially bald was a surprising fact. Poole had been quite slow to discover. His first revelation had come when both his nurses removed their luxuriant tresses without the slightest sign of embarrassment. Just before several mijkor, the bald specialist arrived to give him a series of microbiological checks. He had never been surrounded by so many hairless people, and his initial guess was that this was the latest step in the medical professor's endless war against germs. Like many of his guesses, it was completely wrong, and when he discovered the true reason, he amused himself by saying how often he would have been sure, had he not known in advance that his visitor's hair was not their own. The answer was seldom with men, never with women. This was obviously the great age of the wig maker. Professor Anderson wasted no time. That afternoon, the nurses smeared some evil-smelling cream over Paul's head, and then when he looked into the mirror an hour later, he did not recognize himself. Well, he thought perhaps a wig would be a good idea after all. The brain cap fitting took somewhat longer. First, the mold had to be made, which required him to stay motionless for a few minutes until the plaster set. He fully expected to be told that his head was the wrong shape, and his nurses, giggling most unprofessionally, had a hard time extricating him. Oh, that hurt, he complained. Next came the skull cap itself, a metal helmet that fitted snugly almost down to the ears and triggered a nostalgic thought. Wish my Jewish friends could see me now. After a few minutes, it was so comfortable that he was unaware of his presence. Now, he was ready for installation, a process which he realized with something akin to awe had been to write a passage for almost all the human race for more than half a millennium. There's no need to close your eyes, said the technician, who had been interested by the pretentious title of brain engineer. Almost all age shortened to brainman in popular usage. And setup beginning, all your input will be taken over. Even if your eyes are open, you won't see anything. I wonder if everyone feel nervous at this. Paul asked himself, at this the last moment, I'll be in control of my own mind. Still, I've learned to trust technology of this age. Up to now, it hasn't let me down. Of course, as the old saying goes, there's always a first time. As he had been promised, he had felt nothing except a gentle tickling as the myriad of nanowires wormed their way through his scalp. All his senses were still perfectly normal. When he scanned his familiar room, everything was exactly where it should be. The brain man, wearing his worn skull cap, wired like a fool two pieces of equipment that could easily have been mistaken for a 20th century laptop computer, gave him a reassuring smile. Ready? He asked. There were times when the world cliches were the best ones. Ready, as I'll ever be. Poole answered. Slowly the light faded and seemed to the great silence distend, and even the gently gravity of the tower re-enkissed held upon you. He was embryo, floating in a picturesque void, though not in complete darkness. He has known such a barely visible, near ultraviolet tenebrosity, on the very edge of night, only once in his life. When he had descended further than was altogether wise down the face of a sheer cliff at the outer edge of the Great Barrier Reef, looking down into hundreds of meters of crystalline emptiness, he had felt such a sense of deorientation that he experienced a brief moment of panic and had almost triggered his buoyancy on it before regaining control. Needless to say, he had never mentioned the incident to the space agency physician. From a great distance, a voice spoke out of the immense void that now seemed to surround him, but it did not reach him through his ears. It sounded softly in the echoing labyrinths of his brain. Calibration starting. From time to time, you will be asked the question. You can answer mentally, but it may help to vocalize. Do you understand? Yes. Poole replied, wondering if his lips were indeed moving. There was no way that he could tell. Something was appearing in the void, a grid of thin lines, like a huge sheet of graph paper, that extended up and down, right and left, to the limit of his vision. He tried to move his head, but the image refused to change. Numbers started to flicker across the grid, too fast for him to read, but presumably some circuit was recording them. Paul could not help smiling. Did his cheek move at the familiarity of it all? This was just like the computer-driven eye examination that any oculist of his age would give a client. The grid vanished, to be replaced by a smooth sheet of color filling his entire field of view. In a few seconds, they flashed from one end of the spectrum to the other. Could have told you that? Paul muttered silently. My color vision's perfect. Next for hearing, I suppose. He was quite correct. A faint drumming sound accelerated until it became a roast, the audible she, then raced up the musical scale until it disappeared beyond the range of human hearing into bat and dolphin territory. That was the last of the simple, straightforward test. He was briefly assailed by stench and flavors, most of them pleasant, but some quite the reverse. Then he became, or so it seemed, a puppy on an invisible string. He presumed that his neuromuscular control was being tested and hoped that there were no external manifestations. If there were, he would probably look like someone in the terminal stage of Saint Peter's dance. And for one movement, he even had a violent erection, but was unable to give it a reality check before he fell into a dreamless sleep.